It was an ordinary evening, at least, it seemed like it. The bright lights of the set cast a warm glow on the set, a cozy talk show stage where the world's most famous faces come to share their stories. But this time, something was about to happen that would shatter the calm veneer of celebrity interviews. Sylvester Stallone, a living legend in Hollywood, was sitting comfortably in the hot seat. Known for his action-packed roles and a reputation for being unshakably cool under pressure, Stallone was more than just an actor. He was an icon, a symbol of strength, resilience, and an ironclad will. Yet, on this particular evening, he would face a challenge unlike anything he had ever encountered. Sitting across from him was a well-known liberal TV host, famous for his hard-hitting questions, cutting-edge commentary, and unapologetic stance on social issues. The host, known for his sharp wit and fearless confrontations, wasn't about to let Stallone off easy. In fact, he had one question in mind, a question that would push the boundaries of comfort and test the very values that Stallone had held dear for decades. What began as a typical celebrity interview quickly escalated. The host's provocations were biting, cutting straight to the heart of Stallone's personal beliefs, challenging everything the actor stood for. The audience, expecting the usual charm from Stallone, leaned forward as tension built. The host leaned in, his gaze locked on Stallone's, knowing that this was his moment, his chance to expose the truth behind the tough guy persona. But what happened next would leave everyone in the room speechless. The world watched in disbelief as Stallone, usually known for his silence and stoic responses, responded not with anger, but with an unyielding calm and wisdom that shocked the audience and stunned even his most ardent critics. What could Stallone possibly say that would turn this heated moment into something truly profound? Stay tuned as we unravel the drama of a confrontation that would change the way we view both these cultural icons. As the lights dimmed slightly, the studio's energy shifted. It was clear this wasn't going to be your typical late-night chat. Sylvester Stallone, calm and collected, settled into his chair, a man whose career had been defined by his ability to play under pressure. But tonight, the pressure wasn't coming from a set of physical challenges. It was coming from a well-known liberal TV host, a man whose provocative commentary had earned him both adoration and controversy. He wasn't interested in hearing about Stallone's latest film or his role as the beloved action hero. No, tonight, the host was set on something deeper, something more personal. Stallone, you've built an empire on the idea of toughness and self-reliance, the host began, his voice laced with challenge. But in today's world, that mindset seems, well, outdated. Don't you think it's time to evolve? The world doesn't need more lone wolves. We need people who are ready to address the bigger issues like inequality, climate change, and the widening gap between the rich and the poor. So tell me, Sylvester, how do you justify your values in a world that's rapidly changing? The audience sat in stunned silence. This wasn't a question anyone expected. It wasn't about his acting career or his legacy. This was a full-on assault on the core of Stallone's beliefs. The host's voice cut through the air, demanding a response, his eyes fixed firmly on Stallone as if daring him to answer. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the soft hum of the studio lights above them. Stallone, the legendary actor whose career was built on his indomitable will, didn't flinch. His expression remained composed, but his mind was processing the challenge. He leaned forward slightly, his voice steady but resonant, as if every word he spoke was carefully considered. "Well," he began, pausing for just a moment to gather his thoughts, "I believe the world is full of contradictions. You're right, we need to address inequality, climate change, and a host of other issues. But that doesn't mean we throw away the values that have kept us going. Toughness doesn't mean isolation. It means resilience. It means fighting through adversity, whether that's fighting for a cause, fighting for your family, or fighting for yourself. The real question is, what are you willing to fight for?" There was a pause, the audience unsure of how to respond. The host, however, wasn't backing down. He leaned in even closer, his voice turning more incisive. "Isn't that exactly the problem, though? People like you and me, people with privilege, have the luxury of fighting for values. But for millions of others out there, it's a matter of survival. They're not fighting for a sense of toughness or resilience, they're fighting just to survive, to put food on the table, to escape poverty. How can you, as someone who has been at the top of the mountain, possibly understand that struggle?" This was it. The turning point. The confrontation everyone had been waiting for. Stallone's eyes never wavered. His face remained unreadable, but there was a quiet strength in his demeanor that sent a ripple of respect through the room. He knew that, at that moment, his response would either sink or save the conversation. "I didn't come from privilege," Stallone said quietly. "I came from a place where every day was a fight, just to survive, just to make it. I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to feel like you don't have a shot. But I also know that it's not about what you have or don't have, it's about what you do with what you've got. You're right, the system's broken. People are suffering. But it's our ability to stand up, to keep moving, that can change everything. I don't just talk about resilience, I've lived it. The words hung in the air, almost palpable. Stallone wasn't just defending his values. He was speaking from his own lived experience, from a place of raw authenticity that no one in the room could deny. The liberal TV host, typically unshakable in his boldness, now seemed to hesitate, his sharp edge momentarily dulled by the weight of Stallone's words. The studio was still. Everyone was listening. But then, just as quickly, the host recovered, his next question more challenging than ever. You're right. But here's the thing, if you believe in this toughness so much, then why do we keep seeing the same old cycle? Wealthy people get richer, the poor get poorer. Your idea of fighting for yourself doesn't solve that, does it? For the first time, Stallone's expression shifted. A faint, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of his lips, a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. He took a deep breath before responding, his voice calm, yet filled with undeniable conviction. No, it doesn't. But it's a start. Because when you've got nothing, when you're up against the wall, sometimes all you have is the fight inside you. And if enough people realize that they've got the power to change their own story, to take back control, then that's when the real fight begins. We might not win every battle, but we keep going. And that's how you make a difference. The room was silent. The TV host sat back, momentarily stunned by the weight of Stallone's words. For all his provocations, for all his confrontational tactics, it was clear that Stallone had not only held his ground but had elevated the conversation to a level of insight the audience hadn't expected. In that moment, it became evident. This wasn't just a debate about values or politics. It was about something far deeper, the power of resilience, the courage to keep moving forward, and the unspoken understanding that no matter where you come from, everyone has a battle to fight. And sometimes, the greatest fight is simply choosing to stay in the ring. The tension in the room had reached its peak. For the first time in the entire interview, the liberal TV host, usually known for his unwavering confidence, was struggling to find words. His earlier provocations had been met with Stallone's resilience, each answer cutting through the noise with wisdom and unshakable calm. But now, it seemed like the host had met his match, and the fight was no longer about political ideals, it had become something deeper. The studio audience, who had initially been drawn into the conflict, was now captivated by something else, the profound vulnerability that had emerged from this exchange. Stallone, a man who had lived through decades of battles on and off screen, had shown that his strength wasn't in his fists or his image. It was in his understanding of human nature, in his ability to stand tall even when the world around him was in chaos. But just as the host was about to regroup, he leaned forward, his voice softer now but laced with intensity. So, let me get this straight, he began, his eyes narrowing as if he were trying to cut through the layers of Stallone's rhetoric. You're saying that personal responsibility, grit, and perseverance are the answer to the world's problems? You really believe that? When we're faced with global crises, when entire communities are struggling to survive, are you seriously suggesting that toughness is the key? The question hung in the air like a thundercloud, and the audience waited for Stallone's response. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. It was a question many had asked, a question that, in many ways, had haunted Stallone throughout his career. Can individual perseverance truly make a difference in the face of overwhelming global issues? For a moment, Stallone remained still. Then, slowly, he leaned back in his chair, his eyes meeting the host's with a quiet intensity. His words were slow but deliberate, each one carrying the weight of years spent navigating the highs and lows of life, both in the public eye and in private. No, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm not saying that toughness alone will fix the world. What I'm saying is that toughness is what gets us through the storm. It's what helps us fight for the world we want to see. It's what helps people stand up when everything around them is telling them to sit down. It's not about doing it alone. It's about being strong enough to fight alongside others. Toughness isn't about being invincible, it's about enduring. The room was still. Even the host, ever the challenger, seemed to pause for a beat, considering Stallone's words. There was no quick retort, no sharp comeback. The moment had arrived. Stallone had spoken from the heart, not just about personal values, but about the shared struggle that connects us all. In a way, he had not only answered the host's question but had reframed the entire conversation. This wasn't about divisive ideologies or political talking points. This was about the human spirit, about the deep reservoirs of strength that all people have within them, regardless of their circumstances. The host shifted in his chair, his expression softening. The tension in the room was palpable, but the atmosphere had shifted. The conflict wasn't over, not yet, but something had changed. Stallone's words had done something unexpected. They had disarmed the confrontation. For the first time in the evening, the host didn't feel like the one in control of the narrative. Instead, he was left reflecting, searching for a response that could match the depth of Stallone's honesty. The usual sharpness of his commentary seemed to dull in the face of such genuine vulnerability and wisdom. The crowd, once poised to witness a fierce verbal sparring match, now found themselves in a collective moment of contemplation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the host spoke, his voice softer than before. I can't argue with that, he said, his tone now mocked by a degree of respect. Maybe there's more to this idea of resilience than I gave it credit for. The room, once tense with animosity, seemed to release a collective breath. The audience, whose allegiance had been torn between the host and Stallone, now seemed united in their admiration for the actor. What had begun as a fierce challenge had been transformed into a moment of shared understanding, a moment that left everyone in the room questioning the nature of true strength. As the interview came to a close, the host, no longer in his usual confrontational mode, offered a rare smile. "You've given me something to think about, Sylvester," he said, his voice laced with genuine admiration. "I never expected this conversation to take this turn. But I respect your perspective." Stallone, his trademark calm demeanor intact, nodded. "Thanks. And that's the thing about conversations. They're not about winning or losing. It's about learning from each other. Even if we don't agree on everything, we can still understand where the other is coming from. And that's where real change starts." As the camera cut away, the audience remained in stunned silence, the weight of the conversation still hanging in the air. What had started as a provocative challenge had turned into something far more powerful, a reminder that even in the midst of conflict, the ability to listen, to show vulnerability, and to remain true to one's beliefs can create the most profound and unexpected moments. In that studio, Stallone had not only defended his values, but he had elevated the conversation, leaving everyone in the room, audience, host, and viewers alike, deeply moved by the quiet strength of his words. As the lights dimmed and the credits began to roll, the audience in the studio and at home were left in stunned silence. The confrontation that had started with a sharp challenge had ended not with anger or division, but with something much more profound, something that many of us need now more than ever. A moment of clarity, a moment of connection, and, most importantly, a moment of reflection. Sylvester Stallone had shown us something powerful that night, that true strength isn't about the image we project, the fame we accrue, or the battles we fight on the outside. It's about the battles we face within, the quiet resilience that carries us through the toughest moments of life. The real measure of a person's toughness is not in their ability to fight, but in their capacity to endure and to rise again, even when the world feels overwhelming. In a world often obsessed with the idea of winning, whether in politics, business, or social media, Stallone's message was simple. Sometimes, the most important thing we can do is keep going. And in the process, we can lift others up too. It's not enough to just be tough, we must also be compassionate. To fight for something greater than ourselves, to listen, and to understand. The host, who had come into the interview expecting to tear down Stallone's values, walked away with something unexpected, a renewed sense of respect for a man whose perspective had shifted the entire conversation. The interview had become more than just a debate about politics or personal beliefs. It had become a profound reminder that at the heart of every conflict, there lies an opportunity for growth, for learning, and for change. As the cameras faded to black, Stallone's final words lingered in the air. "It's not about winning or losing. It's about learning from each other. Even if we don't agree on everything, we can still understand where the other is coming from. And that's where real change starts." It's a message we all need to hear. In a world so often divided, it's easy to forget that the power to change our circumstances starts with how we treat others, how we listen, and how we keep fighting, together, for a better tomorrow. So, as you leave this story behind, take with you this message. The challenges we face may seem insurmountable, but with resilience, compassion, and the willingness to learn from one another, there's no limit to the good we can do. In the fight for a better world, we are all in this together. And the journey starts with one step. Your step.